Welcome to the Solemn Vanguard channel. Today we are doing another tier list. As I said, we're doing 3. We have the standard one from yesterday, the premium one today, and then finally just the one where I rate the clans I like or dislike. So today we're doing premium, and let's see what's poppin'. I'm not sure how I'm gonna divide the tiers once again. Maybe it'll be different from the standard one. It just depends as we go through these clans. So first of all, we have Aquaforce. Now Aquaforce has a few builds, so it's pretty hard to pin down exactly which one we're talking about, but in general I would say it has issues. It's piece reliant. The new Valios is not that great. The thing with Valios is that cool locking power, fun times, but being locked behind GB just hurts so damn much. You really need to be able to do more on first stride than what Alexandros does. There's too many clans that do stronger things than Alexandros and stronger things than the new Valios. However, they do have a pretty scary rush / grade 2 game. Ripples is out there, so I can see them being in C. Definitely not D, but definitely not high up either. Next up, we have Angel Feather. Now Angel Feather has more issues. Its most viable build is probably Geese, and that is just really shit when we have such an aggro meta as we do right now. We actually have it in both formats, and so for that reason it feels slow. It's basically the same thing as we had yesterday's video. Like, Angels just can't cope. I assume maybe the Ultima loop is stronger, but for now I'm afraid I'll have to put it in D. We'll see if more support actually fixes that. Now Bermuda has so many builds, it's hard to say where they actually belong. We have stuff like Coral that can still be pretty scary. Their first stride can push quite some damage, not as much as like a Katrina turn, but still more than your typical deck. You can also play, of course, the Melody build, where you just have all these Melody units together with Shandy and Spica to create some multi-attack. Force 2 to be scary with some crits. They also still have access to Sandy if they want to run that, or Aqua. So it's definitely, I would say, better than Aquaforce, but not as good as the top of the top decks. So B tier feels pretty good. Now DP, again, DP has a lot of builds. So you're gonna see, because premium has this large amount of cards already, obviously the game has been out for many years now, you definitely have more build options that are actually, you know, alright and not just jokes. When you see in standard, most clans have 1 build, maybe 2, and anything beyond that is just, you know, budget decks that are fun but really not even worth it to talk about. Whereas here that's different. Like DP has the build where they use the old starter to superior ride and then just smash face with the premium collection stride and hope that kills someone with Force 2. Sometimes it just works. It's actually pretty scary when it does go off. They can also just play the older X-Gallop build. Die-Liner also makes them a bit more sturdy, and so there's very different builds, but overall I don't think anyone would disagree when I put it in the C tier together with Aquaforce, where it's definitely not the most competitive deck, but it can still be scary here and there. It's not like an Angel Feather where you really gotta try and figure out some insane combo to even have any chance, and that's, you know, that's sad. That's just the way of life. It's the way Genesis has to cope in standard right now, Gears has to cope in standard right now, but future support can always change that. Now next we have Golds. Now Golds is obviously a very good deck in premium right now. The question is, do we have an S tier here? I don't know. So do I suppose I want to put it in S or A. It basically depends on how many decks we can actually put in the competitive bracket. Like, if we look at Japanese results right now, the WGP representation, the most represented deck was Nubatama, and then second Kagero, and only then Gold Paladin. I suppose we'll see. For now, I can put it in S. I do feel that would be fair, but it may end up being a case where you have like a few decks in S, and then we have to start considering how we're really gonna shape this up. Obviously, Gold Paladin going first, and if it hits the nuts, it will probably auto win, unless your deck is one of those slow, bulky decks that can really survive almost anything. Then again, it can also play pretty well going second, which is something most people don't really respect, but it can. It's not just you roll the dice and, oh, I went first, so guess I win. It's like, you roll the dice, you went first, you're probably gonna win. You go second, and you can still just win. So it's definitely not this high roll 100% brain dead deck as it used to be. The mirror is also pretty interesting to actually take a look at. My hatred towards it has definitely diminished compared to the Worlds format, where you literally just had your one play. Now there's many things they can do, so they can actually go second, which also makes them scarier. They're obviously in the best decks, but I don't know how I'm gonna put the rest of the clans next to them. So next up we have Dark Irregulars. Now, in Discord, in YouTube comments, people probably at first said this. This is what I noticed. People said Dark Irregulars best deck and so forth. Really though, it can just randomly die to so much stuff. Then again, if their full Gasti combo goes off, it mostly kills people. Do you value its unfair perfect game over its overall fragility? I really don't know. This is why I don't know if I want to do this or if I want to do this. I don't know. I suppose I could put it like this for now, but it could also end up... it's pretty tough. Dark Irregulars is a scary deck, but it has piece reliant issues. Pretty reliant on not being controlled in a weird way. But when the combo fully goes off, you're probably dead. This is the way we're gonna do it, and we may upgrade things later. Now, next up, Genesis. Genesis has a few options. Do note we're in the Raging Tactics meta, so Infinity is not in it yet. So when we look at Genesis, we're mostly looking at the Wiseman loop, and I think the Wiseman loop is actually pretty good. The issue is that again, it is a combo, and so it can be randomly aggroed out. Then again, it can also damage deny because it can kill from one. Now obviously, if you don't get a full combo off with all of the power, the deck is pretty prone to just getting too many defensive V triggers against it and shutting down. It's definitely not C. I would dare to put it in B, but then definitely on the lower end of B. So as clans are added, I can definitely see Bermuda and Genesis going lower and lower in this B tier. Now, next up, we have Gear Chronicle. Gear Chronicle is not an Angel Feather type deck, but it's definitely in the C category, where ZTB can still make hella hand. It can still skip a person's turn. It can still run all of the G cards that made it pretty good. It can multi-attack, but when it's doing those multi-attacks and gets a defensive trigger against it, the deck just shuts down. You're forced to run a lot of 5k shields, older triggers if you want to run, for example, the ZTB heal to be able to fetch it of Cruising Tiger. That just makes it a bit more fragile than back in the day where it was just an unfair super strong deck. Next up we have Neo Nectar. Now we all know that I'm not a big fan of Neo Nectar. It is ridiculously easy to pilot. It is as easy to pilot as basically standard decks. I dislike when wins are gotten for stupid reasons. Like, it doesn't matter that you misplay, you just hit some crit early and that completely changed the tide of the game, and Neo Nectar is really one of those decks. It is, however, very strong. It will almost always do the exact same thing, follow its game plan no matter what happens, and randomly win off that. So it's definitely one of those top tier decks. Now, it can have a worse matchup against golds. DI is dependent on the build. Like, it can lose to DI or it can win against DI depending on the DI build. Winning against golds is basically whoever outsacks the other. Like, if Gold Paladin mid rolls or high rolls, it probably beats Neo, but if it low rolls, then Neo beats it. It's a very, very annoying sacky matchup in my opinion, if both players are playing like at a decent level, let's say. Now, next up, Granblue. Now, everyone will disagree with me here, or people who haven't tested a lot. I would say Granblue is definitely high B. It can destroy Neo Nectar. It can destroy loads of DI builds. It can destroy loads of Gold Paladin players, assuming that the Golds player like has a really good build and is playing perfectly, and the Granblue player isn't. Golds will destroy them. But Granblue has a better matchup against a lot of decks than people give it credit for. The big issue is that you come up against a random Link Joker or a random Gradora, guess you lose, and there's nothing you can do about it. It just has these weird checks in random rogue decks, but then it can also steal quite some wins off decks that you wouldn't necessarily give it because you don't see it represented. Now, it did actually win a BCS in Philippines, but we haven't seen it drop beyond that as far as I'm aware. Now, next up we have Great Nature. Once again, I think it's actually a pretty good deck. The issue with the deck is that it can be built in a lot of ways. Like, and not even talking about, oh, you run Hamsuke or Leopold. No, I'm talking about the grade 2, the grade 1, and the backup grade 3 lineup can be tutored for very different goals. You can be going all in on the Balaral and the Managarmer aggro side with Crayon Tigers and so forth, or you can go all in into control, running the Honolis, running the Tank Mice, and really zoning in on that Zoa kill. And so there's a lot of little things you can do and change to make this deck do different things. You also have the Megaloma combo with the damage adders. It's just a lot of little things you can do with this deck that make it able to beat really good decks, but then lose harder to others. And so it's really hard to make this deck beat everything in the field. It is pretty fragile, but then it can also just get the most disgusting wins. So I definitely feel like Great Nature is a good deck. We have seen it topping quite a bit, actually more than Granblue, but I do feel Granblue is much sturdier than Great Nature. So I don't know if I would have to switch these. It's a bit odd, but so I do feel like this is the correct place to put them. Bermuda and Genesis are definitely worse than these two. I don't know. We'll see. This is fine for now. Next up, we have Link Joker. Now, Link Joker has to be parsed out in very different decks. We have Glendios, we have Messiah, we have Freeze Ray Anything, we have the Leader Messiah, we have Freeze Ray the Leader Messiah, which got top 8 in BCS France. We have Chaos itself. So, like, where do we put this? I feel like it's definitely in C, maybe low B. It's pretty slow overall. It gets checked by a lot of the good decks. It can also check quite some good decks, like a Link Joker can definitely hurt a DI deck or a Neo Nectar deck, but then it can get destroyed by random shit in B and A. So I don't know. I definitely don't think it's in the best spot right now. To me, in Premium, I would take anything B to a tournament and feel fine, but I don't know if I would feel fine with Link Joker, honestly. Next up, we have Mega Colony. This deck is always super represented at tournaments for some reason. I really think there's a lot of Gradora fans, but I don't think the deck is that good. The fundamental issue with Mega Colony is that it stops your opponent from playing the game, but it doesn't play the game itself. It just tries desperately to stop opponent's skills from going off, but then there is no skill that it does that is actually really scary. And so the second it gets behind in any way, it's just, I don't know, I just don't think it's that good. I think gold ruins it. It can hurt DI, but then DI can be built and played in certain ways to ruin it as well. People play Mega Colony saying, oh, it can beat Neo, and it's like, Neo should destroy you before you even get your stride. So like, I don't know. It also gets stopped by so much stuff. It's like one of those decks that is incredibly hilarious to play and auto win against certain stuff, like against Granblue and Pale Moon. But then beyond that, it does absolutely nothing. So I don't know. I think it's high C, maybe low B. Maybe low B is giving it more respect than Link Joker. That would be fair, because that's the thing though. Gradora can still go into Zoa and win that way, whereas Link Joker can only pray to go into Integral. So maybe this is more fair. Next up, we have Nova Grappler. Oh, Nova Grappler. When we first saw Bustard, most of us thought Bustard was busted, and Bustard is busted. The issue is that it has no way to play a grade 2 game, and so if you're unable to play a grade 2 game, how are you gonna fully like utilize Bustard? The second Nova Grappler gets an actually scary grade 2 game, or some way to make sure that they survive another person's stride to then go into Bustard and have the soul to utilize it fully, it will be insane. It is a really strong stride in a vacuum. It's just missing cards around it to fully utilize it right now. However, it's still, you know, a fine deck. I definitely think it's better than Aqua Force. I definitely think it's better than Link Joker. So low B, top of C is probably a good way to put it. Next up, Nubatama. Nubatama, I definitely think deserves to be in this B, higher B bracket or mid B bracket. It is one of those decks that, first of all, if as a low rolls just gets destroyed by Nuba, one of the things is that Jamio putting your hand to 4 is actually viable in this format, unlike standard, because you have more ways to draw, you have strides to somewhat fill your hand, and then you also have those strides to push even harder. So you have more aggro than the standard deck and more hand to take away from your opponents, because opponents have bigger hands than in standard, but then those shrink. And then also you have a bigger hand to actually last till a full Jamio Congo. So all of those things kind of compounding makes it so Nubatama is definitely in a better shape here, way better shape here than in standard. With that being said, it should definitely still die to Neo Nectar, and so B tier for that reason. Next up, OTT. Now OTT has many ways to build it. We still have just the old Ichitom. We saw Tsukuyomi actually win BCS France. I definitely think it's a pretty good deck, but it's not A. I would dare to say it's here in the middle B, maybe higher B, somewhere in this area. It definitely is better than people give it credit for. That's actually a thing we see very often in this format. There aren't many Japanese results because Japan really doesn't have a big premium scene right now. So I definitely think OTT, and specifically Mohamed's Tsukuyomi build, is much better than the representation would have you believe, but it's also not like one of the best decks. Next up, Murakumo. Now Murakumo has many ways to be built. We have the infinite loop, but again, we have this super fast format where people just destroy your hand very early, and so the loop is just too slow, even though that when you get it off, you're probably going to win unless your opponent is running Honolys. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in C. I don't know where exactly. The infinite loop can catch some people off guard, or if your opponent's breaking, you can get it off and you auto win. Cool, but it's just not reliable enough to really top an event, and it's definitely not as good as some of these decks in B tier, so I feel like C is going to be a fine place for it. Next up, Pale Moon. Now, Pale Moon has had some tops this season, not many, and it's actually very different builds. Like we've seen in Canada, the Pale Moon loop topping, which should absolutely not be a thing anymore given this super aggro meta. I read in the post of the person that it destroyed Ezel. I have no clue how. If the Ezel player goes first and just hits the complete roll and then takes Axel 1 instead of Axel 2, Pale Moon should just die with all those tiny 5k shields. That loop at least. There's another Pale Moon build, the one where you use Dorian together with the older G support to make a gigantic hand. We actually saw a really good French player, I think his last name is Mathieu, sorry if I'm ruining names right here, but he's a really good player, actually piloting it to, I believe, X2 because of a time issue. It could have been X1 as well. But so that build just draws infinite hand and then slowly tries to whittle your opponent's resources away, or tries to do a Nightmare Doll Alice loop, and that way wins the game without ever dying. So that's still pretty good, I would say. It's definitely somewhere high up in Bs. And then we also have variants with Silverthorn. One of the decks in top 8 in Canada was actually Silverthorn, as far as I'm aware. They basically run the Harry Strides with the Restander Girl from Premium Collection, along with some of the older Silverthorn cards to make the current Silverthorn support even better. So you could instantly ride up into Lugia and actually start pushing damage and then draw off Dorian again. Or if you're given first stride, do your first stride, draw a lot of cards because of Dorian again, also build free field, and then just get some extra attacks that the standard deck can't. So it definitely has quite some things going for it. It's not very represented, but it's pretty strong. I could definitely see it being somewhere here. I definitely think this is like a fair place to put it right now. But again, we have very different builds, and so it's hard to say. Like I would say Pale Moon Loop is maybe more towards here, and then this build is more towards here. So it's pretty hard to put clans in a little bucket like this. Next we have Tachi. Now Tachi has had no results as far as I'm aware. It can still just play the standard deck, go first, hit Anger Blader and auto win. That's just a funny option. It also has a superior ride, but it's nowhere near as good as Ezel in that superior ride department. The stride it got in Premium Collection, while good, doesn't really fix the issue that it requires all these pieces, and its grade 2 game isn't the best, and so it's basically in the same boat as Nova Grappler, but then slightly worse. So I would say it's like, I don't know, same issues as Aqua Force, more so than Nova Grappler. So this feels like the correct place to put it. Next up, Royal Paladin. Again, Royal Paladin, we could be looking at quite some builds. We saw some kind of weird Brave build at one point doing something in a shop challenge, but that's obviously like not big enough to warrant being a result to really skew all of this. I definitely think the Blaster build is going to be the primary Royal Paladin deck we talk about, the one where you just use your Floral Paladin Flogal, restand your Blaster Blade, maybe together with the Fides. Actually, when we first saw Fides, most people were saying it's broken, but then turns out no results are happening. I assume that's because it's piece reliant, and your grade 2 game is like pretty good, but not insane, and you don't really plus. So there's like a lot of little factors that just skew it out of favor, and then you're asking yourself the question, why would you take this deck over something like Luard, which is also piece reliant, but then has a higher payoff than something like the Blaster deck? So that's probably gonna be the reason. I'm not sure where to put it really. It has had so little results that I'm afraid I will just have to put it in this bracket, but I definitely think it's actually stronger than this bracket. I could see it becoming low B if people actually started testing more with this deck. It's definitely a very under-researched deck, to put it that way. It has a lot of cards, and calling from deck is always a super strong mechanic, so who knows, maybe someone will find something spicy with all of these old cards. Now, Kagero. Damn, Kagero is interesting. So essentially, when Premium Collection was first shown, people didn't quite respect his stride because, I don't know, like there were way spookier strides, let's say. But then more and more people started topping with the Legion. So you started using, is it the End? Yes, the End together with the Legion to do 3 attacks of over 20, 30, 40, 50,000 with extra crits. And so that is such a scary play that it started topping. It's getting popular. It's also very easy to play. So if you're a Kagero fan and you are maybe only have the standard deck, you want to get into premium, it's a really simple deck. Like, I would dare to say it's easier than Neo Nectar, but it just doesn't feel as oppressive as often, and that's why it's not being cried about as much by people like me. So for that reason, definitely think it's high B, could even be low A, but I don't know about that. This could actually be fine. It's definitely better than people give it credit for. You actually had 2 different builds doing very well. There's actually a bunch of builds, but like, I'm pretty sure that the BCS Richmond one was the first major top in the post-ban format. That was won by Dominic Juan. He's going to Worlds for the 2nd time now, I believe. And then people started running different builds with different trigger lineups, like more draws, whereas he was going all in on the crits. You had people trying the different kinds of overlords. So it's definitely not solved yet as a deck, but it's definitely very scary. It's also more sturdy, I would say, than the Great Nature and the Grand Blue. So this does feel like a correct place to put it, though this also feels fine. You know, there's a lot of leeway here. Then we have Spike Brothers. Now, Spikes, again, has a lot of different builds you can go for. You can either go for the original Agrias build with the Juggernaut Maximums and so forth, just try to push some pressure. You have the GB8 build, which runs the Jelly Beans and the older heal triggers, search them out, instantly turbo to GB8, you can damage deny people. The GB8 is a very scary win condition. So that is, I think, more viable than the Agrias build. But then you also have the Good End build together with the new Bad End Dragger from Raging Tactics. Make some really big, scary multi-attacks. Basically like a scarier Morfessa turn almost, which doesn't rely on as many pieces. So it's definitely pretty strong over there. I could see this being about in this region, probably the region it's definitely being slept on. And you could also, of course, make some hybrid where you run the good end and the bad end, but you also run some of the GB8 stuff. So you always have different outs depending on the situation. Definitely not solved again, because there's quite some ways you can build this deck. And I do feel like the different builds are all competitively viable, which is a very rare thing. Like if you go to, let's say, a clan like Grand Blue, there's really only one archetype to build the deck, and within that archetype you have many different builds, but it's always going to rely on striding your Obadiah, making a big hand, pushing with Skull Dragon and some multi-attacker to then eventually go into Megiddo or Scare Deck Megiddo. It's usually going to be something like that, and then obviously there's a lot of decks you can play because the deck is so, you know, moldable to the meta. But then Spikes actually has very different ways to win. You have Bad End Dragger together with Good End, and you have GB8, and those are so different, and your builds can be so different to adapt to that. So that's pretty interesting to take a look at. Like for one, the GB8 build could just damage stall Dark Irregulars and be pretty fine, but then it could maybe get outrushed by Neo Nectar because you are running the older heals, you are running some draw triggers because you want to have a big hand for the GB8 combo, but then you're running smaller shield, which then makes it a bit worse against that. Finally, we have Narukami. This is probably, we all saw the premium collection stride. It's pretty bad given the current support. Now, we don't know if the new Narukami hand binding will maybe synergize with it so well that it becomes good, but for now, I'm definitely gonna have to put it in D tier as well. Rest in peace for now. I feel like most decks are fine to take to a tournament. Like anything in B or higher, I could just see people taking to a tournament. God, anything in D I wouldn't. In C I could see, like if you're a big fan of the clan, go ahead. I don't know. There's people who love Angel Feather and Narukami. I have a friend Calum who loves Angel Feather, will often play it in premium and do fine with Gabriel and stuff like that, so cool. But it's definitely not looking too hot support wise right now. We also then finally have Shadow Paladin. Now, I will put this boy in B. I don't know where exactly. I feel like this is a fine spot to put it. It has the Morfessa combo. If they get that off, cool, it's a very scary deck. But it is so piece reliant, and we are in a pretty aggressive, fast meta. As you know, Neo Nectar and Gold Paladin really push, and so that makes it so Shadow Paladin doesn't really have the time to set up that combo. Now, personally, if I could push in my personal testing and my personal thoughts, I would do this. I would put Mega Colony lower, and I would put Nova Grappler a bit lower too. Genesis top right here, and then Bermuda as well. Okay, this is how I would do it. Now, I could definitely see these four go to low B, but to me, if you're going to a premium event, anything of B and A is competitively viable and a fine pick. Quite some things in B will destroy things in A. Like Grand Blue can destroy some of these things depending on their builds. Great Nature can destroy some of these depending on the builds. I'm pretty sure if you've seen my Italy vlog where I play Great Nature against a Dark Irregular player, Great Nature can play in a way and build in a way to just not care about Dark Irregulars at all, even though the Dark Irregular player can try and play around stuff, and it just doesn't matter because they're gonna get Zoad and die. And without any damage, they're not gonna do much. They can run Bobo to try and stop that from happening, but then they're running an extra card that doesn't charge and does nothing against these two scary other decks, Gold Paladin and Neo. Then we have Spikes, again, can damage deny some of these decks. It can damage deny Dark Irregular, cool, Dark Irregular can run Bobo, but then it dies to these two decks next to it again, and the cycle just continues. So anything in B and A, to me, is competitively viable and can be taken to an event. I do think C also has merit, but the lower C I personally wouldn't. So that's what it looks like to me. Shadow Paladin can randomly kill DI. DI can get randomly killed by Oracle Think Tank. Oracle Think Tank can also destroy Neo and Golds. Pale Moon can destroy Golds. Pale Moon cannot destroy Neo as easily because Pale Moon's plussing starts late. And so if Neo wins the grade 2 game against them, they obviously die. If Pale Moon just rides up instantly, they can randomly die to Neo as well. So Pale Moon against Neo, Pale Moon against Gold, fine. Pale Moon against Dark Irregular, cool, because Pale Moon can use their grade 3 together with the G Guardian to shut their whole loop down, which is hilarious, by the way. And so, as I said, anything in B can really take down stuff in A, and then some things in A can even randomly die to things in C, and some things in B can even die to C. It's more so, how reliably do you think something will do well at an event? And as I said, something like Grand Blue just gets utterly destroyed by Gridora and Chaos, and that's what's really keeping it from potentially going in here. It's a bit slower than these top decks right here and can't instantly kill, which makes it very susceptible to being totally controlled and locked down. So those are the tiers to me. Let me know if you have any input right here. I'd happily have a listen. And that is all for today. Subscribe to the Solemn Vanguard channel. Click the bell button to stay up to date. Like the video if you liked the video, and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I will see you soon. Ciao.